Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to do is take it back. If you've been following the podcast, you know that I did an episode called 97 Kyle, which kind of talked about the things that I did in 97. Well, if you see the title here, you see 81 Kyle. And on this episode, I'm going to talk about some of the things that I did in 1981. Full disclosure, in 1981, that was the year that I turned 9 years old. So somebody that's old and washed, I can sit back and reminisce to some degree. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. Check out my t-shirt. It's a rotary phone, something that you youngsters know nothing about. But I saw a video on TikTok the other day. Shout out to the homie Big C who sent me the video, and it just really, really took me back to the things that we did in the 80s. In 1981 in particular, these are some of the things that I did, and I wanted to reminisce for a second and share those experiences with you. Now it was dope growing up in the 80s. I'll admit, again, I was born in 72. So the 80s, the 90s were super, super dope. I wouldn't trade my time in the 80s nor my lifestyle with anybody. Those years were special, and some of the things that we did was very special. But looking at that TikTok video, it took me back. One, we were outside in 81. It wasn't really a lot going on, but we were definitely outside. I do remember 1981 specifically because that was the year that my family got cable TV. And cable TV was a big thing for us. We went from having 4 channels to like 25 channels, which that was a big deal. But when we got outside, we played games. One of the main games that we played, hide and seek. Listen, hide and seek was cool. Now I know, as we got a little older, it kind of got a little outdated. But to be able to hide from someone, lay low in the cut, be very quiet, make sure that you're hiding someplace that nobody can find you. That was pretty special. I don't know, looking back on it, was there ever a winner in hide and seek? I mean, like, if you go and you get lost and nobody can find you, I mean, like, I'm trying to think. I can't remember how the game actually ended. Did we just kind of give up and say, okay, well, we can't find Reggie, so he won? That type of thing. But hide and seek was fun. That was an outdoor game that everybody played. It was one of the few games that we played outdoors where you could play with young boys and young girls, and it was cool. It was all inclusive. There was no gender, issues or anything like that. Anybody could play. So hide and seek was definitely a favorite back in 81. One thing that they did in 81 that I only experienced a couple of times, and that was when I left my hometown of Florence, South Carolina, and went up north to the place where I was born in Newark, New Jersey. And that was play in the fire hydrant. Summertime, it's hot. Kids would, and sometimes adults would crack open the fire hydrant and spray up the street, and you'd run in the water and play in the water and get sprayed by the fire hydrant. Again, I never experienced that in Florence because you couldn't play with no fire hydrants in Florence. But in Newark, it's an inner city, and you got city blocks and everything like that. So you had kids from all over the neighborhoods and stuff like that playing in the street, and they would turn on the fire hydrants. And then, of course, the cops would come and they turn them off, and they get, kids would get mad. But that was the ultimate, like, ghetto fun. And like I said, I only got a chance to experience that a couple of times, and it happened both times when I was in Newark. But it never happened in Florence because, like I said, you couldn't turn the water hydrants on. We did. They didn't play like that in the South. What else? 81 one, we rode bikes, but more specifically, we made homemade ramps. And what I mean by that is like you would make a ramp, particularly for little boys. Our thing was to get on our bikes and ride as fast as we could and then make a ramp and jump over something. Now, that was really inspired by the late great Evil Knievel. I think he Evil Knievel dead? I think he's dead. If he's not dead, I'm sorry, Evil Knievel. But I think he's no longer with us. But yeah, that was inspired by Evil Knievel. Evil Knievel, for those who don't know or weren't around at that particular time, he was a daredevil. He would take his motorcycle and he would, jump over a bunch of cars. He'd jump over a bunch of buses. He had one time, I think, tried to jump over the Grand Canyon on his motorcycle. He was a daredevil. And his claim to fame was he had just about broken, at one point in time, he had just about broken every bone in his body. And Evil Knievel inspired us to make homemade ramps. So you make a homemade ramp and you put the ramp, and like, let's just say you want to jump over, I don't know, a tricycle. So you make the ramp, and the ramp would have to be but so high. And then you get on your bike, you ride as fast as you could, hit the ramp and jump over the tricycle. So it was pretty cool. And we got, kind of daredevilish. I remember a couple of times where we would have, we make our homemade ramps and we would jump over people. So here's the thing. You'd lay the ramp down and then you might have three friends, Steven, Tony, and Kevin, and they'd lay down on their backs side by side, and you had to ride your bike and hit the ramp and jump over them. Now, I never laid down because I ain't trust my friends to jump over me, and nothing is worse than having that bike come down on you. But nobody never got hurt. But yeah, homemade ramps were the joint. 81 Kyle didn't do this probably until like 83, 84, but it was very popular. And that was, you get yourself a cardboard, you cut it out, and you lay it on the ground. And the next thing you know, you're breakdancing. Breakdancing was big, man. Breaking in general was huge, not only for the hip hop culture or rap culture, if you will, because it was called rap back then, but it was another form of expression. It was an extension of rap music, which in 81, rap music, I mean, we had like The Message, we had Sugar Hill Gang, you had Curtis Blow. You didn't have a lot of artists. I mean, I'll just be honest. And then the artists that you did have, the music didn't really get to us like as fast as it would as you picking up your phone and, listening to your favorite song or what have you like that. But in 81, rap was coming up. It was definitely coming up. And breaking was an extension of rap. And I love watching cats breakdance. I mean, breakdancing, popping and locking. That was the joint, man. I mean, like it was a lot of fun. And that period was the gray area period that right before rap would explode, because 83, 84, Run DMC breaks onto the scene. Curtis Blow gets bigger. Soon you'll have LL, and you'd have a host of groups like Public Enemy, NWA, as the back half of the 80s came into play. And but breakdancing was something that I remember distinctly somebody telling me like, oh, that breakdancing and that rap crap, it ain't going to stick around long. It's going to get played out just like disco. And the last thing you wanted to do is have your music or your energy be stamped out. And, a lot of people didn't think it'd last a while, but it did. And breakdancing was a part of the culture. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it also incorporated not just breakdancing, but being a B-boy or B-girl. And that was how you dressed. I distinctly remember the wristbands you could get that had the spikes. I remember getting spiked wristbands. And you had the little shades that came across just right across your eyes. And so it was a kind of like a punk rock look, but man, you couldn't tell me nothing when it came time to breakdance. Like I said, I didn't breakdance in 81. I probably didn't start trying to breakdance until 82. But in 81, I would watch people do it, and it was cool, man. It was so cool. What else? 81 definitely was a time that you were in the house and you were in the house on Saturday mornings. And what was Saturday mornings made for? Saturday mornings were made for cartoons. If you came up in this generation, you spent your Saturday mornings watching cartoons. And it didn't matter which set of cartoons that you watched. You just watched cartoons. And mostly me and my friends, we would pretty much watch cartoons from the time we got up, which was, for some 8 o'clock. Some got up earlier than that. And I wish I had time to talk about how we could never get up for school on time, but we always found time to get up early on Saturday mornings to watch cartoons. But it didn't matter if you were watching the Smurfs, Super Friends, the Incredible Hulk. The list goes on and on, from He-Man to Transformers to Muppet Baby. I didn't like Muppet Babies, but anyway. But Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, the Jetsons, the Flintstones, the list goes on and on as far as the cartoons that we watched. And we were locked in all Saturday morning up until wrestling came on at noon. And I did say wrestling. But wrestling and then Soul Train. But Saturday morning cartoons were the joint. You got your bowl of cereal, you laid down on the floor and you watch, or you sat at the table and you watch cartoons. And it was something that it was a constant every single Saturday. You didn't miss a Saturday because at that particular time in the 80s, there were no cartoons coming on like during the week. So you had to see cartoons on Saturdays. That was a must. It was appointment TV, or as we say, must see TV. No doubt about it. So Saturday morning cartoons were the joint. You had to see that. In 81, you definitely were outside, particularly in the summertime. The thing that would happen was you could literally be outside all day long. More often than not, me and the kids that I was friends with in our neighborhood, we would leave out of the house early in the morning and in the summertime, and you didn't want to come in the house until, you had to. And when did you have to come in the house? Before the streetlights came on. That was like the universal sign. Like, you didn't know what time it was, and because in the summertime you spring forward, or in spring you spring forward, so the days are longer. So the streetlights might not come on until about 8:30, 9 o'clock. So you could literally be outside all day long, but you had to be in the house by the time the streetlights came on. If you didn't, and your mama had to come looking for you, oh, it was problems. It was definitely problems. 81, Kyle also did a lot of racing. And what I don't mean racing cars. I don't mean racing bikes. I mean racing on foot. That was a big thing in my neighborhood, like being the fastest kid. And not to brag or nothing, but of my age group and the kids in my neighborhood, I was the fastest. And I'd race anybody. And I remember because like there was in the apartment complex where we lived, there was some other kids that came from another apartment complex, and they had this kid named Tony who was supposed to be fast. And somebody said, well, let's race. And it was like, no, we're not racing. We want to race the fastest guy you got over here. And it was like, well, that would be Kyle. And they said, well, who you going to have race against him? And it was like, we're going to put Tony up against him. And they didn't know that I had already seen Tony run before, but they were just like, all right, we'll go get Kyle. And I was actually in the house. So I had knocking the door. He had knocked the door. And so my mom comes, she said, hey, your friend's outside. They want you to come outside. So I go outside and it was like, hey, man, this guy from over here, he says his name is Tony. He's faster than you. And I'm like, oh, for real? And so we all line up and somebody they walk it off maybe about, I don't know, 40, 50 yards or whatever like that. And there's the finish line. Somebody's standing at the finish line and they're standing with their arms out open like this. If you're watching on YouTube, you see my arms spread like I'm on the cross or something. And the idea was you had to run and you had to be the first one to pass them and win. And I remember, man, I got outside, I put my shoes on, and I ain't stretch. I ain't do nothing. I got out there, and I'll be honest, they go on your mark, get set, go, and then you take off running. Tony got a jump on me. He got a quick jump. In fact, I think he started a little early. But man, little by little, I caught up with him and I passed him. And I beat him to the finish line. And the kids from the other neighborhood they were mad. They were surprised. Like they didn't think anybody was faster than Tony. But I had a little speed about it. And plus I wasn't tall at all. So I was short and fast. But yeah, racing. We used to love the race. I would race anybody. I don't recall. I recall getting beat once. Abdul Martin beat me, and me and Abdul are mad cool to this day. And he beat me once, and I don't think I raced him after that because I realized he was. And we were in like fourth grade. We raced at school, and he was one of my best friends in fourth grade, and he beat me, and I was like, all right, I ain't racing no more. Well, I wasn't racing him no more, and I didn't race him again. And it's funny because we ended up going to different high schools. I went to Wilson High School in Florence, South Carolina. He went to West Florence, and we played against each other in football. And he was still fast. By the time we got to high school, he was faster and I was fast in high school, but he was way faster. But that's another story for another day. What else in 81? Oh, at school. At school, we got the dope school pizza. Listen, man, 81. That pizza was incredible. The pizza was rectangular. It was probably about this big. It was thick. The school pizza to me was better than anything that you could find at Pizza Hut or Pizza Inn or your local little pizza place. Back then there was no Domino's or there was no Little Caesars or all these other pizza franchises. Pizza Hut was around, but it wasn't touching the school pizza. The school pizza was the joint. And I remember having kids in my class who didn't eat pizza. And those kids were the coolest because those kids would give you their pizza. And that's all you wanted was somebody to give you their pizza. If you got 2 pizzas or better yet, 3 pizzas, man, I'm lunching. I'm chilling. I'm good for the day. And I might even give it away. But school pizzas were the joint. I love those school pizzas. I don't know if they still serve them in school now, but if they do, they can't compare. What else? Another outside thing we did was the merry-go-round. Honestly, I wasn't really a big fan of the merry-go-round, but I would like to watch people get on it. In the apartment complex, we used to call it the projects, but in the apartment complex where we lived, or the projects where we lived, there was a merry-go-round, so I would watch kids get on it. I get on it every now and then, but the merry-go-round was there to strictly and unequivocally get you dizzy to the point where you couldn't walk, dizzy to the point where you were damn near drunk walking around. I remember a couple of kids getting on the merry-go-round and spinning around so much till they ended up throwing up. That was enough for me. I was good on that. But the merry-go-round was another thing from 81. What else? Going to the movies. Going to the movies was really, really dope in 81 because you were at that age where you could go with an older sibling or older cousin, and you didn't necessarily have to go with your parents, but you could not go to see a R-rated movie. But I remember a couple of times being dropped off at the movies with my cousin, and then we'd sneak into other movies. One time we snuck into an R-rated movie where we got thrown out. And I mean, I'm 9, man. I don't know I don't know the difference between an R-rated movie and a PG movie. And this was back in the day where, let me date myself. It was just the movies were rated G, PG, and R. That was it. There was no PG-13. There was no NC-17. It didn't have those ratings. But yeah, going to the movie theaters were dope because one, movies were cheap. I mean, like I remember my mom giving me like $2 to go to the movie theater. And I got in for $2 and I got some popcorn and a drink for $2. I mean, my movie ticket, popcorn, and a drink were $2 even. That's all I ever took to the movie theater. And again, I'm 9 years old. So she would drop me off, come back and pick me up. And that was dope. And I remember one time, me and a couple of my buddies went, she dropped us off at the movie theater, and we actually walked back home. And walking back home, man, relatively speaking, it wasn't that far. At least it didn't seem that far. But I mean, it was about 3 or 4 miles. But we didn't care. I mean, it was 81. It was a bunch of kids. We went to the movies and we had a good time. So we moved around a lot. That was the beauty of being in Florence as opposed to being in Newark. We moved around a lot. I could go and be on one side of Florence and then take my bike and then go down this street and be gone for 6 or 7 hours. There was no cell phone, so there was no way in contacting me. I didn't have, you couldn't page me or anything like that. And you just had to, your parents just had to wait for you to come home. So, or, sometimes if they needed to see you, they put the word out, or they could holler your name out. And if you were within earshot, you'd come running and go in the house. But yeah, we would get on our bikes. And speaking of bikes, we would ride our bikes so far. And then the cool thing was you would always have somebody who didn't feel like walking or who didn't have a bike, and they'd ride on your handlebars. So you had to kind of pedal and look around them as you pedal the bike and everything. But that's how we did it in 81. 81, we also played a lot of board games. I mentioned that a little early. We played board games like Monopoly, Life. I remember playing backgammon. I was nice in backgammon back in the day. Board games were always fun. Then probably around this time, I got introduced to a game that I would fall in love with, and that was called Uno. Man, we play Uno all the time. Uno, you could almost get into a fight playing Uno. Those games were fun. What else in 81? Oh man, can't forget the ice cream truck. The ice cream man would come through in the summertime with the ice cream truck, with his little music or whatever like that playing. The kids would come out running, trying to get, their favorite ice cream. Mine was the All-Star. I think I mentioned that on another podcast, the All-Star ice cream. That was my favorite. But you could get any type of ice cream you wanted from the ice cream man. What else did we do in 81? Oh, this wasn't, the next thing I'm about to tell you probably wasn't that sanitary. It probably wasn't that safe either, but we used to flip off mattresses. And I know you're laughing. Let me explain. Okay, so like, let's say Mr. Robinson lives in apartment 5B. Mr. Robinson got a new bedroom set, so he doesn't want his mattress. So Mr. Robinson would bring his mattress, box spring, the whole nine, and he'd bring it to the dumpster. He'd lay it upside the dumpster. So when the trash people would come pick it up, they would pick it up and take it away. Well, before the trash people would come, it's always one little kid. One little kid will take the mattress, and because the mattress has the box springs and stuff in it, they would want to say, hey, let's jump off the mattress. And one thing about jumping on the mattress, it was the ghetto version of a trampoline. So I was somebody who could do backflips. So we would flip off the mattresses. And I mean, like, again, you don't know. I mean, I don't know for nothing. Those mattresses probably were stained. They probably were contaminated. They probably weren't something that you should be touching or laying down on. But we didn't care. I mean, we're in the projects. We don't know any better, and we're just having a good time. So we would flip off the mattresses and stuff like that. That was probably the most like ghetto fun. And I wouldn't call where we lived a ghetto, but I would call it. But that was some ghetto fun right there. And last but not least, we spent a lot of time in the house watching TV as a family. I remember distinctly in 81 watching shows like MASH with my dad, and I hated MASH. I couldn't stand, and my dad was in Vietnam, so he loved MASH. I couldn't stand a show like that. But I mean, watching shows like Knight Rider, Miami Vice, shows like that, we would always, because here's the thing. There was no such thing as having your own quote unquote TV. There was no TV in my room. And when we finally did get a TV in the room, it was just strictly for us playing the Atari 2600. So that part about it, you couldn't have no cable TV in your room. Hell, we barely had cable. So we watched TV as a family. And, you know, those times were really special. Like I said, you didn't have a choice as to what you had to watch because more often than not, and especially in our households, there was only one TV. You were lucky if you had a TV in your parents' bedroom. And if they did, it didn't have cable on it. And you were super, super lucky if you had a TV in your own room. And that surely didn't have cable on it. And it probably didn't have color either. That's right. The good old black and white TV. But yeah, that's how it was in 81, man. I just thought I'd share that with y'all. Again, thanks for checking out this bonus edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes like this one on Sundays at midnight. If you haven't done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. You can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. The podcast is also on YouTube as well. We have full audio and video on YouTube. Be sure to download, subscribe there as well. If you want to leave comments, you can leave comments on YouTube as well as Spotify. If you're on Instagram, follow us. If you're on Twitter X, follow us. If you're on Facebook, follow us. If you're on the TikTok, follow us at 12 Kyle at 12 Kyle Podcast. And if you want to give us some money, donate to the show, $TWELVEKYLE. Again, that's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this bonus edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5 G's.